Hey everyone, and welcome back to part 20 of my No Loss Impossible Mage playthrough of King's Bounty the Legend. In the previous video, I cleared most of Hadar. I left a couple of the more difficult heroes and the giant spider boss over there, but I was otherwise all set to start clearing Ardan's peaks, as well as the tunnels beneath it. This is the more difficult part of the zone, so hopefully I'll still be able to go pretty far before I have to turn back. Let's go see what we're looking at. This next encounter was actually pretty interesting. There were a lot of goblins here and quite a few ranged units. So if I tried to block the giants and ranged units with dragons, whether they were real or phantoms, there was enough damage output in the group that it wasn't going to hold out for long enough to keep them away from my back line. That meant that I needed to put target on during the first turn, but I also had to block off the giants without putting my dragons in danger. So I ended up using a trap on them instead. Once I had that initial setup, I used Geyser to soften up the mobs, but I was still incredibly lucky to get through this without losses. The goblins made it all the way to my evil beholders, and they were left with just one hit point after the attack. So now I just had to make sure they were never hit again. As it turns out, that was actually pretty easy once the vanguard of goblins was down. I tried to take on some of the fights in front of the castle, but I was having a hard time, so I decided to go look around elsewhere before coming back here. By all rights, I really shouldn't have been able to pull off this next fight without losses. I don't usually toot my own horn this much, but I actually did a really good job here, so I'm going to give you the full play-by-play. My first move will be a mass cast of Shackles. Without it, the Demonesses will teleport my units into danger, and the Imps will throw fireballs with a splash effect. Both of these would result in some massive damage to my units, and I couldn't afford it. Now I'm going to cast Demon Portal in this corner. It'll force the Cerberus to go around it, so it won't get as close to my back line. Then the summoned unit will end up tanking for me in the first portion of the fight. Now you'll notice that when the enemy units charge up, they get into a nice big group, but they leave a hex open. My dragons are going to fly right in there and attack all of them at once, bringing back a bunch of my mana with it. In the meantime, I'm going to target the Cerberus up front with every ranged unit in the hopes that one of the crowd control effects will work on it. Sleep didn't work, but Shock did, and that gives me some much needed breathing room. Now because I recharged enough mana to do it, I could hit them with Geyser. Then I blocked off the left side of the field with my dragons. I didn't want them getting hit by everything on that side of the field, but I had to slow them down somehow. Making a bottleneck out of the left side seemed like the way to go, especially since my summons would be coming soon to take up the right side. Once I saw that I was getting imps, I had two priorities. The imps that were closing in on the back line had to go, but I also had to keep the other group of Cerberus locked down. The hit and run ability would allow me to do both. Now at this point I have a problem. My dragons are getting low on health, so I know I'll have to cast heal on my next turn. On the other hand, I had plenty of rage after everything that happened in the first 2 turns, so I'm going to spend it on an ice orb to help take out that other big group of Cerberus. Like I said before, healing the dragons was non-negotiable, but now I had to find a way to keep the Cerberus away from the back line for another turn. The imps were still asleep, and the Cerberus were at least chilled, so all I had to do was block off the hex in front of them. It took me a few moments, but I decided to keep the dragons still and attack the imps in front of them. Then I moved my own imps in front of the Cerberus to cut them off. The ice orb would keep the other stack busy, which freed the imps up for the job. While it does put them in range for the next turn, I ended up hypnotizing the Cerberus on the right because they could attack both the Demonesses and the Imps at the same time. I'm running out of space here, but the numbers are getting smaller too, so I only have to hold out a little bit longer. Thankfully, the Archmagi and the Cyclops just about took out the Imps up front by the end of the turn. I thought about using Evil Shoal to hit their entire field, but then it hit me. Stonewall would keep the Cerberus back for another turn, so now I just had to worry about the left side again. Unfortunately, the shackles wore off, so they were able to teleport my units around. The fortunate part, however, was that my beholders were placed far enough away from the action that they could just set up camp on the other side of the field, leaving the Cyclops to tank anything that got through. With all the dangerous units safely away from my back line and the numbers dwindling, this fight is finally over. It's just a matter of time before they all fall. Whew, wasn't that something? Now I have another castle unlocked, and I'm also going to pick up this Griffin banner. I thought it might come in handy down the road. Before I go any further, I'm going to go ahead and take on the Keepers for the Bronze Ring. The fight should be pretty easy, and it'll give me some extra maximum mana. Here I finally used the roast rat. I'm not sure why I was holding on to it, to be honest. I'm well past the point where 50 leadership is a drop in the bucket, but 2 mana and 2 rage is definitely not. Notably, this means that if I really wanted to, I could twin cast Geyser to start a fight at this point. I'm also going to make another army change before taking on more of the demon mobs. This time I'll be adding giants to the roster, and I'll be replacing the Archmagi since I can't resurrect them yet. With their Earthquake ability, I shouldn't lose out on too much range damage, and it gives me one less unit that I have to worry about taking losses for. Giants are even better tanks than the dragons are, with the only downside being that dragons lose morale from their inclusion. Giants get a boost to morale though, so it should kind of cancel out. As you can see, I lost some beholders at the start of this fight, which is acceptable now, since that's the only unit that I can resurrect. The key was that I just couldn't lose too many of them. Mana is still a finite resource after all, so the focus of my level 5 units was on taking down the archdemons as fast as possible. I knew I could automatically put the hyenas to sleep whenever I needed to, so they didn't concern me despite their numbers. As soon as I had the opportunity though, I had to put slow on the Cerberus. In case you haven't noticed, these guys are actually pretty powerful for a level 3 unit, and I didn't want them getting anywhere near me. Once the archdemons were down, I knew my dragons could focus on taking out the evil beholders, and the fire spiders didn't have enough units to really bother me. Another level for Lena, and this time I don't have a choice. I'll have to get an upgrade for the Ice Orb no matter what. Thankfully, my rage cap is high enough to actually cast it after the upgrade these days, so as I discussed last time this happened, I prefer the attack upgrades to the defensive ones. I don't usually use these for tanking, especially in the late game, but the damage after charging across the field will be impressive even at that point. Part of me wanted to replace the evil beholders because I couldn't resurrect them, but I didn't see anything worth replacing them with. So eventually I gave up, but I'll speed up that whole process so we can get back to the fights. This time I was able to make the encounters in front of the Dwarven Castle work. About the only real problem in this fight is that there are 3 different stacks of giants and they're spread all over the field. So the way I countered it was to make 2 different phantoms of my dragons, one that could go to the top of the field and one that could go to the bottom. That would neutralize their earthquake ability, and then I could focus on offense for the rest of the battle. Just like the last time I ran into powerful level 5 units, I'm just going to let these dragons do as they please with my beholders. I'll focus all my attention on them to reduce the amount of damage they can do, but the strategy doesn't really change outside of that. I'm still going to wreck everything with an initial geyser, and then I'm going to place target on the Cyclops. As soon as the danger is past, I'll just resurrect the beholders and move on to the next one. This next fight was all about using magic shackles at the start to neutralize the alchemists. The other units didn't come in big enough numbers to be dangerous, so once the ranged abilities were taken from them, I could just throw my level 5 units up front and take them out at my own pace. The other fights around here were getting pretty difficult, so I decided it was time to top off my units and take another crack at the Islands of Freedom. I could resurrect some of my units now, so I didn't have to worry as much about spell damage causing unavoidable losses. Which is exactly what I was waiting for before my next effort in that zone. Still, I was able to clear a pretty good portion of Cordar during this attempt, so if I can manage to eke out a few more victories over there, it shouldn't be long before I can complete the main quest over in Cordar and move over to the next zone. As always, if you've enjoyed watching the playthrough, make sure you leave a like or comment to help boost the channel before you go, and consider subscribing to see similar content from me in the future. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.